but I can't forgive the game that took place on a whaling ship for not having a single fucking whale in it! I'm in.
So to follow up on my previous review of a zombie survival horror game on a boat, I present to you Zombie Survival Horror Game on a Boat. Released in 2012 originally for the 3DS, the game was intended to hark back to the series' horror roots, with the setting of the ship being an intentional choice for the claustrophobic, isolated tension it naturally conveys. It was later ported to home consoles, like pretty much all of them, and I'm playing it on the Switch for this because it's the console I had plugged in at the time.
I have danced with this game before. I played the demo of it on the 3DS when it first came out, and I was impressed with how it looked and it felt. And it generally got positive reviews as well, so what we have here, I'm hoping, is the sea monster adventure that I wanted Cold Fear to be.
Our story takes place 1 year after the destruction of a man-made floating city called Terra Grigia, a completely self-sustaining island powered entirely by solar energy. The city was targeted by a bioterrorist group called Veltro who opposed the development of the city because reasons. They released hunters and viruses and caused all sorts of biological havoc, and in a bid to contain this outbreak of sorts, the solar energy matrix used to power the city was turned on itself. The orders given by a man named Morgan Lansdale. The whole place was disintegrated and left as ruins, but in doing so, they successfully banded Veltro, removing them as a threat. Cut to now, and Jill Valentine Teehee and her partner Parker are working for the BSAA headed by Clive O'Brien. While investigating bizarre infected corpses washed up from the ruins of Terra Grigia, they get a call that Chris Redfield Teehee and his partner Jessica lost contact when investigating a lead regarding Veltro. Despite them apparently being in the mountains during this time, their last known position is on the Queen Zenobia, a once passenger cruise ship turned ghost ship in the middle of the ocean. Teehee. So it's up to Jill and Parker to find and save Chris and discover the secrets of Veltro, Terra Grigia and the Queen Zenobia. Shock horror, when we get there, the ship is infested with zombies infected with the T-Abyss virus, a waterborne strain of the T-virus. There's no signs of Chris Redfield, but lots of signs of Veltro, who are going to release the T-Abyss virus and infect the oceans in retaliation to the decimation during the destruction of Terra Grigia. We initially take control of Jill in an over-the-shoulder third-person perspective, but fairly regularly throughout the adventure we change it up and control someone else. All characters control and feel exactly the same, so there's never that jarring adjusting to new mechanics, which is very welcomed, as the changes do come fairly frequently. We have the usual mix of gun and melee combat, but there's also an environmental scanner called the Genesis. It can be used to discover unseen items and scan enemies, which builds up this meter, which when full rewards the player with a healing item. Honestly, I don't know what else the Genesis does. I like the concept at the very start, using it to investigate stuff. I felt very detective. But it kind of became annoying when it was entirely necessary to scan items to be able to pick them up. And as you can imagine, with this being a survival horror, finding every last bullet is crucial to surviving enemy encounters, so I was scanning around a lot. Combat also encourages timing dodges from close enemy attacks, which becomes essential when your character moves with zero urgency. Like, I'm honestly not convinced that I'm not being stupid and there's a run button that I missed. Like, there's a quick turn, but that's not a substitution for being able to, run away. I don't know, maybe Jill's just had enough at this point. Like, ugh, zombies, what a shock. She's so casual throughout the whole thing, it's almost comical. But despite it being frustratingly slow at times, it does increase the tension of enemy encounters. And there's plenty of them in a huge variety. Not just infected humans either, there's wolves and fish, obviously. And the cutie patootie hunters are here too. All of the designs are grotesque and imposing, and every encounter feels threatening. They provide a body horror shock as they are destroyed and just dissolve into a pile of goo. I genuinely can't get over that this was a 3DS game. How did they manage to get all this onto their little cartridge? Just mad. The further into the story we venture, the more sinister the enemies become. There's different enemies appearing in sections on the land, mini-bosses appear as regular enemies, we even avoid enemies in defenseless sections underwater. But my favourite was the recurring enemy Rachel, the mutated partner of this guy, Raymond. She's proper creepy, chanting weird playful lines and sprinting right at you. And if you think you've killed her, no, she just comes back again later. There's never any warning either, you just open a door and bam, Rachel. And every encounter becomes more dangerous with her coming at you when you're surrounded by enemies. She's relentless. Helping intensify the creepiness of these surreal abstract enemies is the setting we're in. The dark, tight corridors and isolating atmosphere is so cool. The ship is decorated so ornately, the grandeur and a huge disparity to the events. Emphasizing the setting is the swaying of the ship in the storm, but only sometimes, it just depends what room you're in. As time goes on and events occur, the ship begins to degrade, flooding the lower decks and the whole ass rooms. I love this because it freshens up the environments, introducing new mechanics and enemies when wading through the water. Oh, this was some of the scariest stuff when it first happened, like anticipating a jump scare as well, not knowing what enemy was going to appear or when. But as the story develops and is told from the perspective of other characters, our setting changes with it. We explore mountains on a few occasions, plus the story at times is told in a non-linear fashion, and we get to experience Terra Grigia during its destruction. But constantly changing between settings, time periods, and characters breaks the flow of exploring the ship. The atmosphere naturally just isn't the same in the other places. You get sucked in, engrossed in what is going on around, and then suddenly I'm playing as these clowns for some reason. I like the episodic nature of the game, don't get me wrong, with the cliffhangers at the end of the chapters and recaps at the start of the next, but this could have been achieved with just the setting of the ship and cutscenes. The cutting back and forth does impact the explorative nature of the survival horror gameplay. We are still finding keys and solving puzzles, but in a very watered down capacity to a point it's basically linear. Like, we find one key which opens one door, and that's the exploration ticked off for that episode. There's little to none of the precarious item management the series is known for, and even key items such as keys are used automatically in the correct context, removing any of the brain thinky stuff as well. As with a lot of games, it was a follow the enemies kind of affair to tell I was heading in the right direction. But even then the objective was very obvious, so I rarely headed the wrong way. While it was disappointing to not have something like the Spencer Mansion or Castle Domitresque in boat form, it was a very streamlined experience with little frustrating backtracking, and I rarely got lost. Which is a godsend considering some of these loading times.
So were these constantly changing perspectives and time periods worth sacrificing gameplay of old in order to tell an engaging story?
So Jill and Parker get up to some mischief and go off the radar completely stuck on the Queen Zenobia, along with Raymond, who turns out was a former colleague of Parker's. Word gets out to Chris and Jessica, who were in the mountains and not in the ocean as suggested at the start, about the loss of communication, so off they go to find and rescue them. But silly gooses end up on the Queen Semiramis, an identical ship also acting as a base for Veltro. Chris and Jill reunite on the Zenobia, and this gas mask looking guy claiming to be Veltro is shot dead by Jessica, only for it to end up being Raymond she's killed. But he's not dead, and she's actually a mole working for Morgan Lansdale, who was arming Veltro during their operations to attack Terra Grigia. And she's out here to destroy the ships and the evidence on board. The true purpose of Jill and Chris etc. being out here in the ocean was to draw out Lansdale and orchestrate his downfall. A plan concocted by O'Brien and Raymond. But O'Brien couldn't have just told Chris and Jill that. No! It had to be a secret, because anyone on the team could be a mole. Anyone! Definitely not the woman who almost immediately opened up with her, "Do you trust me?" And I immediately said, no. We find the T-Abyss virus, we find out that there's a plan to infect the ocean with it, and naturally neutralise it before such a thing could occur. All the while, Jessica has initiated the self-destruct sequence, and now there's a scramble to escape the ship. But, yeah, it was fun. You're good, but, like, literally mad. I didn't really get it, to be honest, apart from like the key points with the T-Abyss virus and how that worked, and that Lansdale was a bad guy. It was one of those ones that I had to look up the story on Wikipedia after I finished to make sure I got it right. There was so many twists that I didn't know what was real anymore. Like, oh, he's a bad guy, but he's a good guy, but now he's dead, but he's alive, but he's a bad guy. And there was the bit where Jill was drowning, but it's okay, because Chris is on the ship now to rescue her, and he gets to her location and she's not there, because he's on the wrong ship. There's actually 2 ships, but guess what, guys? There's not 2 ships, there's 3 ships. And the characters are literally mental.
Where are you?
I don't know. A room, I think.
And how did Parker, with a gunshot wound and a large fall into fire, survive and emerge with nothing but a limp? But despite it being mad, the episodic breakdown of the game did encourage me to play on when I was constantly being left on cliffhangers like, how are Chris and Jill gonna get out of this one? Ooh. And the non-linear narrative does help with the storytelling, seeing flashbacks to the team 1 year prior, but in doing so reduces how explorative the game could have been if it had just taken place on the ship, as how the entire first game took place in the mansion. So the ending sequence of the game begins with a mad dash escape off the Queen Zenobia during the self-destruct sequence. The ship begins to sink as you're chased by the rising water, releasing valves and fighting enemies. All the while the ship itself becomes more and more vertical, culminating in the greatest enemy of all time, Zombie Whale! This thing is vile, so vile. Leading up to this were lots of notes about parasites infected with the TBS virus. They were then given to hosts to live and grow in, which gave rise to unique mutations. There seemed to be no limit to how big they could grow, the only inhibitor being the size of the host. And then I saw the word whale and died. Those cheeky, brilliant bastards. So this monstrosity appears crawling with parasites pouring out of every orifice. The multi-stage boss has the same strategy to just shoot at all the parasites and avoid being hit. But the actual battle is quite fun. Although I would have liked more mechanics involving the whale anatomy and behaviour, whatever that means. Because while it is a whale, really the threat are the parasites. When we beat Zombie Whale and escape the destroyed Queen Zenobia, we discovered there was indeed a third ship called the Dido at the bottom of the ocean around the ruins of Terra Grigia. We have some fun underwater sections here, dodging monstrosities, which was super creepy. Not all of the Dido is flooded somehow, and in the apparent oxygen-rich waterless rooms of the ship, the leader of Veltro has been living for a whole ass year. He infects himself with a massive amount of the TBS virus, and this is our final boss, Norman. He is a very imposing, fast-moving boss, and teleports around too to really try and catch you off guard. Your dodging skills really get tested here as you maneuver his onslaught. As the battle progresses, he'll try and trick you with more and more decoys, but once you figured out his pattern, it's easy enough to avoid. In fact, I found the decoy stage of the fight easier as they were very obviously telegraphed, which gave more time to anticipate Norman's attacks and get a better shot at him. We kill him, he thanks us, and we get the evidence to prove Morgan Lansdale's a wee dick and he gets arrested. We have some lovely what happened next moments and the obligatory cliffhanger where Raymond gives Jessica some TBS virus in a tube, hopefully leading to more marine terror adventures.
This really was scary, silly fun. Like, Resident Evil can do anything at this point and still be in context with itself. I was just begging for more of the ship, you know, more puzzle solving, more item management, more exploration, like a real escape the room feel like the Spencer Mansion had. But I love the atmosphere and the enemies, and some of the story was alright. It was almost the sea monster adventure I wanted Cold Fear to be. So close, just give me more ship, give me more ship. Now, no, there is a sequel, but I know like zero things about it. I don't even know if it has anything to do with a ship or the ocean, like not a clue. So that could be one to look at in the future. But for now, I think my appetite's been satiated because nothing can top Zombie Whale.
Hey kids, thanks for tuning into my apparently yearly upload. Honestly, I didn't intend for it to get this bad. I'm so sorry. I'm working on myself to get better at this and hopefully get more frequent too. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm even less active there. Okay, bye!